Good morning, everybody. Happy Thursday. We have an amazing show for everybody today. What do we have, Krystal?
Indeed, we do. We've got Ben Burgess on the show. It's his first time here. Excited about that. He's going to talk about a little bit of a liberal freakout this week that has been unfolding before our eyes.
Good stuff, folks.
Always good fodder for conversation. We also have Oren Cass on, great friend of the show. He's going to talk about some lessons for the right.
Yes.
And also for the left, but we're in particular going to focus on the right. Yeah. For how to win again. But we wanted to start with former President Obama finally hitting the campaign trail on behalf of Joe Biden.
Yeah, he's out here, Krystal. It's only, October 15th, a couple of weeks to go until the election day.
Got in the game.
So I was just telling her, I looked this up. Obama hit the campaign trail for Hillary Clinton in June 2016. I know we're in COVID.
Yeah.
I know it's all happening, but look.
Bernie's been out there.
Guys, yeah.
Bernie had a heart attack and he's been out there.
Obama could be out on the trail a lot earlier if he wanted to. Pretty telling to me that for his former vice president, the guy he worked with so close for 8 years, refused to endorse all of that. You all know the deal. It's October 15th, 19 days, maybe 18, I don't know where we are right now, to go until Election Day. So not particularly inspiring. And then, Krystal, he emerges out here with some lessons, right? So he has some lessons. Let's throw this tweet up there on the screen just to preview about what he's about to say. He says, so progressives, if you want progressive legislation, get out there, keep working after the president is elected. You guys know how frustrated I would be when the progressives feeling frustrated would then sit out the midterm. So he returns along, as his wife did, with her reemergence on the public stage, blaming voters for getting things done, for not getting things done. It's just incredible.
Let me set this up a little bit because I listened to this whole podcast.
Oh, God bless you.
So you don't have to. You're welcome. First of all, on the lateness in jumping into the campaign, it is remarkable. And
crazy.
Let's be honest, like you could dismiss it as like, oh, it's COVID and no, he's out there living his best life and so he doesn't really care that much or whatever. You could dismiss it that way. But let's be clear, at every stage, he has dragged his feet with regards to jumping in behind Joe. I mean, that just is reality.
Sure.
They put out all these signals to the press too, through quotes of people familiar with his thinking or whatever, about how he's kind of reluctant about Joe getting into the race, and they were nervous about whether he could pull it off, whether it might ruin his legacy. And then he waited till the last possible moment when the only other option was Bernie Sanders on the ticket for him to actually wade in and get his hands dirty and arrange things the way that he wanted, with Joe Biden being the last person standing that he could rally behind. So that is the context of this. I mean, I also think it is remarkable, he went in very heavily for Hillary Clinton. And as you've played the clip here many, many times, basically I am on the ballot. Consider this a vote for continuing my legacy and me, et cetera. And obviously, it wasn't enough. So maybe he's also feeling maybe I don't have that much of an impact at this point.
Yeah, it's with him. I think it's all hubris. I think he can't stand the humiliation of. I mean, I've played that clip here a million times where he's like, Justice, I'm on the ballot. My name not be on the ballot. Everything I've ever done is on the ballot. And then things worked out. So I don't think he could take it. I don't think he could take being so tied closely to Biden. And if Biden loses, he wants it to be all on Biden and have nothing to do with him. It would screw up one of his Netflix deals or book deals and all these other things.
Well, that's true, too. Well, and here's the other piece. It is also noteworthy, I think that's a good point, that now that the polls look pretty clear, and 538 projection has Trump at a 13% chance of winning at this point. Then once it's kind of safe, then he jumps in, which is kind of classic Obama. In terms of this podcast, so the beginning phase is all basically a lot of expectation lowering about what a president can actually accomplish. It's like, look, I know you can't do everything and it's limited and you're not going to get everything you want. So there's a lot of expectation lowering. And also, that's also very self-serving since his own administration certainly didn't live up to the lofty expectations a lot of people had going into it. But the part that really, really irked me was when he started talking about how progressives should think about politics and how voters should think about their role in all of this. And it's just a lot of blame shifting, the fault of why they didn't get everything done that needed to be done. It didn't lie with him, certainly didn't lie with him.
Yeah.
Didn't lie with members of Congress who, didn't want to go along. He does talk about the Republicans and the obstruction, but on the Democratic side, no, it wasn't any problem there. It wasn't the money in politics and that influence. No, we shouldn't even talk about that, he basically says. It was all the fault of the voters. Let's take a listen.
I differ with Bernie and even Elizabeth in how we talk about this stuff publicly. Most of the time when I didn't get something progressive done while I was president, it wasn't because I was getting donations from some special interest or corporation. It wasn't because there were a bunch of lobbyists whispering in my ear. It was because I didn't have votes. And I think sometimes we attribute the failure of a Democratic or progressive president not getting something done to somehow he and hopefully at some point she is being influenced by these other folks, when in fact it's just that we don't yet have the votes and the clout. So progressives, if you want progressive legislation, get out there and keep working after the president is elected. I don't want to put the cart before the horse, but you guys know how frustrated I would be when progressives, feeling frustrated, would then sit out the midterms. Now I have fewer Democratic votes. Now I've lost the House. Now I've lost the Senate. That is not the right reaction.
He was frustrated. How about the millions of people who still do not have health insurance today? How about them? Think they were a little frustrated? How about the homeowners who lost everything because, the banks got bailed out, and by the way, no one's ever prosecuted, but the homeowners didn't get bailed out. How frustrated do you think the people who lost steady middle-income jobs only to have crappy, precarious service sector, low-wage jobs come back because you didn't do a big enough stimulus, how frustrated do you think they are at this point? You had a supermajority in the Senate. You had the House. You had a supermajority in the Senate. So, okay, why do you think that people didn't show up for you in the midterms? Maybe, is it because you didn't actually go out and end the wars? Maybe that. Maybe because you left millions still uncovered in a Republican health insurance scheme that is basically a giveaway to industry. Had some improvements, don't get me wrong, but did you ever really fight for a public option or a bigger package? No, you didn't. Do you think that maybe people didn't show up because of the job loss and the inability to do enough to keep people in their homes? How about that? How about a little bit of responsibility for the failures when you had total control of this town that totally demotivated progressives and a lot of other people to not want to come out and bother to vote for you in the midterms? How about that?
Well, or 6 million people who voted for him and then voted for Donald Trump, right? I mean, that's clearly like the greatest frustration vote of all. This is peak Obama. This is also why I despise the man. Because, look, he's out there and he's like, we just didn't have the votes. I mean, Obama was a great politician who hated politics. As in, he never wanted to do anything, to switch votes. Great presidents you think he's the first president to have divided government or intransigent voter? Go back and read the history of the New Deal. Every single one of the committee chairmen in Congress, in Senate, hated the New Deal. You know why they went along with it? Because FDR was a great politician. And he forced them to go along, use the will of the people. LBJ did the exact same thing. Eisenhower actually faced a Democratic Senate and still got stuff passed, treaties and things, which his own party didn't even want.
And that is the thing.
Ignores his own role. He was one of the most popular men in America. He won an 8-point lead. Nobody does that anymore. It's one of the last times it will happen in modern American history. Well, maybe, but he will be the least impressive man to ever hold the Oval if he does.
Here is what makes me insane too. Yeah. He says, it's just that we didn't have the votes.
It's not true.
Like that's a force of nature that you have nothing to do with, and there's nothing you can do about it, and it's just is what it is, and you just have to accept it, and there's nothing a president can do to move. Again, you had control of the Senate.
Yes.
You had control of the House. And yes, then Republicans took the House back in 2010 in a massive backlash wave. And you don't see any role or responsibility for yourself in that. And look, I'm not saying it all lies at your feet. Yeah, the Republicans were jerks. They did everything they could to try to defeat you. But you take zero responsibility and still put it on the voters. And I also love the part at the beginning where he's like, oh, I hate the way that Bernie and Elizabeth to a certain extent talk about this, about how it's the donors and it's the lobbyists. Like, he sort of objected to the idea of even talking in public about the influence of money in politics and the influence peddling in this town. I mean, look who you staffed your administration with.
Barack Obama's promise on 2008, I remember this because it inspired me at the time, was he said that one of the first things that he would do in Congress, the first thing, was to ban and reform lobbying. Because he was like, everything stems from lobbying.
Yeah.
So the man who was elected president in 2008 understood that. And I, as a young 16-year-old, I was like, yeah, you know what? This kid, or this guy, knows what he's talking about. Everybody can see it. Now, oh no. Why? Because he's sitting in a multi-million-dollar mansion in Martha's Vineyard. That's where he probably filmed that video. He's got a $60 million book deal, $100 million Netflix deal. He is one of these people now. He is a special interest.
Yeah.
Him and Michelle. That's what they are. And we need to understand them and think of them as such. And you can just see how corrupting. He came to D.C. with hope and change, but he got changed. It's not the other way around.
Did he?
Yeah.
I mean, I think he was always like this
maybe
centrist.
Maybe he was all a fool.
He spent the whole time trying to work with Republicans to cut Social Security. We're lucky that they wanted to cut it even more so they wouldn't go along with his deal. But there was another piece of this that I wanted to play with for you, both because it's newsworthy. He talks about, what he learned from his administration is like, maybe the system doesn't work and maybe we need to change the system, and specifically talks about the filibuster. But even that kind of undermines his previous comments. Oh, there's nothing I could do. There's absolutely nothing. We just didn't have the votes, because he's admitting, oh, actually, I could have learned that we needed to change this system so that we could get things through. I could have actually done some things. There were some tools at my disposal. Is sort of the subtext of what he's talking about here. Let's take a listen to President Obama talking about the filibuster.
McConnell was very explicit about this. He said, look, here's one thing I've learned is as long as we can keep Republicans off Obama's bills, even when they're proposals that used to be Republican proposals, then we can rob them of the veneer of bipartisanship, and that polarization plays to our advantage, right? I mean, he was very systematic and strategic about that. What I have concluded is that the answer is to change some of these structural impediments to just getting stuff done. I mentioned at John Lewis's funeral my belief that I think we should test it. I think we should give Republicans a chance to work with us around reasonable issues. I don't think we should be maximalist and ask for 100% of what we want all the time. But I think that if you continue to see the kind of systematic rejection of even reasonable compromise, there comes a point at which you just have to change how the system works. The filibuster would be one. I would argue that around voting, us going ahead and just making it easier for people to vote, making it harder to suppress the vote, is not partisan. It is an expression of our democracy.
So everybody else learned 10 days into his administration what the Republican posture was going to be. And now, years and years later, finally he's like, yeah, maybe we should do something about this. It is noteworthy, though. Joe Biden is still out there the Republican, once Trump is gone, the Republicans are going to work with me. He's still trying to live in this fantasy land. But the fact that you have Obama out there saying, no, actually, we need to make some of those changes, that is incredibly significant.
It's a big deal. But at the same, it's like you said, look, great men and great presidents, what they do is they realize and they adjust in real time in order to get things done. That's why he will go down Look, at the end of the day, 50 years from now, he's going to be a mediocre president that you barely talk about. He's going to be like Franklin Pierce, all right, in terms of how we understand him 100 years from now. And this is why, because he's a professorial person who like looks back with this type of lens on what actually happened and didn't do anything whenever he was the most powerful man on earth for 8 years. And what do we get? Not very much.
At a time of massive transition and crisis. And unfortunately, the decisions, and maybe this is unfair because it was partly the moment of history that he happened to step into, but the decisions that were made during those years and the course and trajectory that it set for the country have ultimately been devastating. Yeah. And we're living through, some of the consequences of that, not only the election of Donald Trump, but the continued inequality and divergence of these two economies, all of that groundwork and trajectory was laid out of the response to the financial crisis back in 2009. And,
that's right.
But he doesn't want to think about that. He wants to think about how voters didn't show up for him, and that's very frustrating to him, Saagar.
I'm very sorry about that.
All right, we're going to tell you what's on our radars. That's next.